Double Dragon 3, the arcade game, released in 1992 for the Sega Genesis courtesy of Acclaim's Flying Edge brand and Software Creations, is the best version of a generally bad arcade game. It is not, however, the best game to bear the name Double Dragon 3. As far as I'm concerned, the reconfigured NES version is the superior title to bear that name. Not that it really means anything, but that's another story entirely. Originally conceived by Easton Technology rather than the usual Technos, hence the drastically different presentation and such, Double Dragon 3 The Rosetta Stones, aka Double Dragon 3 the arcade game, should be the, whatever, has the Lee brothers going after 3 sacred stones across a worldwide journey to fight some bad dudes. And well, you know, considering the first game, your girl got punched in the belly and then she got killed off, there's nothing left for you to do in number 3, so whatever. Anyways, Double Dragon 3's one defining feature was its shop system, which allowed you to purchase additional moves, characters, and other doohickeys for 1 credit apiece, pretty much introducing microtransactions into the mix long before they became a prevalent thing, unfortunately. This system has been retained for the home port, and the game is generous enough to let you set your starting number of coins or credits, whatever you want to call them, and they do double as continue credits for whenever you die, which happens quite often because collision detection in Double Dragon is somewhat spotty. Some would call it precise, but I wouldn't go that far. Double Dragon 3 on the Genesis, for the most part, manages to replicate the gameplay mechanics of the arcade original almost to a T. Now, you can only play up to 2 players as opposed to the arcade's 3, but that's not a huge loss if you don't have a multi-tap device on hand, which most people wouldn't. The options do let you pick your starting characters, which is a feature carried over from the Japanese version of the arcade Double Dragon 3. I will say that control as a whole feels slightly more functional here than in the arcade original, but that's not really saying a whole lot. In terms of arcade replication and conversion, this Genesis port of Double Dragon 3 gets it done. All 5 missions and its denizens are present and accounted for, as are the few cutscenes and bits and bobs. It's a fairly solid port of the arcade gameplay, with some mild fixes here and there. Unfortunately, Double Dragon 3, even in its original arcade incarnation, was never a well-oiled machine, and it brings home some questionable design choices, notably needing to buy special moves and such when these were available to you in the past from the get-go. You do have some new moves like knee-bashing a downed enemy that's kinda neat if not totally useless. I was never a fan of this buying extra guys where if you've died as your default Lee brother, you switched over to one of the extra characters, of which there are 3 types: big tall dudes, karate dudes, and mixed martial artists. These guys, in all honesty, they don't do much for me. At least the NES version gave you a fucking ninja and his sword that you could play with. These guys are just too bland, too rubbish. They can't even use weapons, that's how bad they suck. Never mind that the weapons are kinda useless here as well, and you're just better off sticking with your martial arts to get the job done. Yeah, the gameplay as a whole is not very good, and while this version tries to get some mild tweaks in to make it more palatable, it doesn't quite succeed. But for all the issues I have with the gameplay, I could at least say that the graphics is Double Dragon 3's greatest aspect. Yes, there's a tendency for the visuals to dip into the earth tones quite a bit, thus making all the backgrounds and such look a little drab color-wise, but at the very least they look fairly decent, the characters look and animate well enough at least, and the few cutscenes that they shoot out aren't too shabby looking. So visually it looks fine, and the Genesis port does a fairly good job of replicating the graphical portion of the game. Hell, this port even fixes the arcade's somewhat jank scrolling, so now it's nice and smooth when it scrolls, for whatever that's worth at least. I think it's a step up. And then there's the audio portion of the game, which has some good tunes on the NES. The original arcade tracks were always a bit on the tinny and scratchy side as far as I was concerned, and thankfully for those who like their music tinny and scratchy, the Mega Drive port retains that in spades. There's really not much of an improvement in this regard, making this one of the rare cases where Nintendo does what Genesis don't. The Genesis version also doesn't have the arcade game's broken sound bites, though that's probably for the best. And the sound effects are what they are, not much else to say there. Like I said, Double Dragon 3 the arcade game for the Sega Genesis is the best version of a largely not good arcade game. It comes closest to looking and sounding the part, the gameplay is as close to arcade perfect as you're going to get on the Mega Drive for whatever that's worth, and the options letting you tweak your coinage and starting characters are a welcome addition. That said, Double Dragon 3 is still largely a bad game that no amount of polish could ever hope to fix. And on a platform with more than its fair share of quality beat-em-ups to choose from, a good port of a bad game should be the furthest thing from anyone's mind. There's plenty of good Double Dragons you could be playing if you look hard enough. This is not one of them.